Samuel Brennan's hand trembled as he lowered the rifle. 12 years he'd eaten alone in this house. 12 years of silence so thick it had become his only companion. And now a woman stood at his stove stirring a pot like she belonged there, wearing an apron that had hung untouched since the day he buried his wife. "I ain't asking you to trust me," she said without turning around. "I'm asking you to eat before the stew gets cold." Before we continue, please subscribe to my channel and stay with me until the very end of this story. Comment below with your city so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The summer heat had baked the Wyoming dirt into something harder than stone, and Samuel Brennan had spent 16 hours in it. His bones ached. His throat burned from dust. His horse moved slow beneath him, both of them too tired for anything but putting one foot in front of the other. He smelled the smoke first. Sam pulled his rifle from its holster before his mind caught up with his hands. Nobody should be at his ranch. Nobody had been at his ranch in 12 years, except him and the ghosts he couldn't shake. He kicked the horse into a run. The door to his house stood open. Light spilled out from inside, warm and golden, the kind of light that came from a fire in the hearth. His hearth. His house. His life that someone had walked into without permission. Sam dismounted and moved quiet toward the doorway. He could hear movement inside. Humming. A woman's voice, soft and steady, humming a tune he didn't recognize. He stepped through the door with his rifle raised. She stood at the stove with her back to him. Red-brown hair, pinned up sleeves rolled to her elbows, stirring something that smelled like heaven and home and everything he'd taught himself to stop wanting. "Put your hands where I can see them," Sam said. She didn't flinch, didn't scream, didn't even turn around. "I will," she said. "Soon as I finish stirring. You let this sit too long, it burns to the bottom." "Ma'am, I got a rifle pointed at your back." "I can see that." She tapped the spoon against the pot and set it down. Then she turned slow and deliberate and raised her hands to shoulder height. "Better." Sam's finger stayed on the trigger. The woman looked about 10 years younger than him, maybe less. Freckles across her nose, eyes the color of good whiskey, and not a trace of fear in them. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Margaret Crawford. Most folks call me Maggie." She nodded toward the table. "You gonna shoot me, or you gonna let me finish making your supper?" "You broke into my house." "Door was unlocked." "That don't make it yours." "No, it don't." Maggie lowered her hands slow. "But I've been traveling for 3 weeks. I ain't got nowhere else to go, and you looked like a man who could use a hot meal." Sam's jaw tightened. "How would you know what I look like?" "I don't, but I know what this house looks like." She gestured around the room. "Dust thick enough to write your name in. One chair at the table. Pantry full of canned beans and nothing else. That tells me plenty." "It tells you nothing." "It tells me you've been alone a long time, mister." She waited. Sam didn't answer. "All right then." Maggie picked up the spoon again. "Supper's almost ready. You can throw me out after you eat, or you can throw me out now. Either way, I'm grateful you didn't shoot first and ask questions, never." She turned back to the stove like the conversation was over. Like a strange man with a rifle wasn't standing 10 feet behind her. Like she had every right to be there. Sam should have grabbed her arm and dragged her out the door. Should have ridden her straight to town and let Sheriff Dawson deal with whatever this was. Instead, he lowered the rifle. "You got 5 minutes to explain," he said. "Starting now." Maggie kept stirring. "I was hired to work for a rancher out here, man named Hollister. Wrote me a letter saying he needed a housekeeper, cook, someone to keep the place running. Paid my train fare from Pennsylvania." "Hollister's dead." "I know that now." Maggie's voice stayed even. "Found out when I got to town this morning. Seems he passed 3 weeks ago. Nobody thought to send word." Sam set the rifle against the wall, but kept it within reach. "That still don't explain why you're in my house." "Because yours was the first one I came to." Maggie finally turned to face him again. "I walked 4 miles from town in this heat, Mr. Whoever you are. I saw smoke from your chimney and figured someone lived here. Figured wrong about the smoke, but the door was open and I needed water before I fell down dead. So you decided to cook. I decided that if I was going to trespass, I might as well make myself useful. She pulled 2 bowls from the shelf. His mother's bowls. Bowls that hadn't been touched in over a decade. Man lets a stranger use his kitchen, least she can do is feed him. Sam watched her ladle stew into the bowls. Her movements were quick and sure, the movements of someone who'd spent years in other people's kitchens. She carried both bowls to the table and set them down. One at the head, where he always sat. One across from it where no one had sat since Ruth died. I ain't eating with you, Sam said. Then don't eat with me. Eat near me. Maggie sat down and picked up her spoon. I'll be quiet as a church mouse. You won't even know I'm here. I know you're here now. Then ask me questions. By the time we finish, I won't be a stranger anymore. Sam stood there 12 years of solitude pushing against something he couldn't name. This woman wasn't begging, wasn't crying, wasn't doing any of the things he'd expect from someone caught breaking into a man's home. She was just eating. Calm as sunrise. His stomach growled loud enough for both of them to hear. Sit down, Mr. Brennan, Maggie said without looking up. Your pride ain't worth starving over. Sam's head snapped toward her. How do you know my name? Man in town told me. Said if I was looking for honest work and didn't mind hard living, Samuel Brennan might need help. She took another bite. Said you were the only decent man in 30 miles who'd let a woman stay one night without expecting something in return. Who told you that? The sheriff. Dawson, I think his name was. Sam pulled out the chair slow. Dawson had a big mouth. Always had. But Dawson also knew better than to send strangers to his door without good reason. He sat. The stew steamed in front of him, thick with potatoes and carrots and meat he hadn't bought. The smell hit him like a fist to the chest. Ruth used to make stew like this. Summer evenings when the heat broke and the house cooled down. She'd stand at that same stove, humming that same way, and Sam would come in from the fields and she'd say, "You gonna eat or you gonna stare at it?" Sam blinked. Maggie was watching him, her spoon halfway to her mouth. Just thinking, he muttered. Thinking don't fill your belly. She nodded toward his bowl. Go on. It ain't poison. Sam picked up his spoon. The first bite tasted like memory. The second tasted like grief. By the third, he'd stopped tasting anything, except hunger finally being satisfied. They ate in silence for a while. Maggie didn't push, didn't chatter, just ate her food and let him eat his, like she understood that sometimes quiet was worth more than words. Where'd you learn to cook like this? Sam finally asked. My mother. Back in Ireland before we came over. Maggie set down her spoon. She worked in a big house cooking for rich folks who never said thank you. Taught me everything she knew. You're Irish. Half. Father was American. Met my mother when he was traveling for business. A small smile crossed her face. Scandal of the county, that was. Wealthy American running off with the cook. Don't sound like a scandal. Sounds like a love story. Most scandals are if you look at them right. Sam finished his stew and pushed the bowl away. His stomach felt full for the first time in months. Full and heavy and wrong somehow, like he'd accepted something he shouldn't have. I can't let you stay, he said. Maggie nodded. I know. It ain't proper. I know that too. People will talk. People always talk. That's what people do. She stood and gathered the bowls. I'll wash these and be on my way. You know anywhere in town that might hire a woman with good references and no family? Sam should have said no, should have pointed her toward the door and let her figure it out herself. He'd done his part, fed her, heard her story. That was more than most men would do, but he thought about the 4 miles back to town. The summer heat that would start building again at dawn. The way she'd said, no family, like it was a wound she'd learned to carry. The boarding house might need help. he heard himself say. Mrs. Chen runs it. She's fair. Mrs. Chen. Maggie nodded. I'll ask her tomorrow. Tomorrow? It's past dark, Mr. Brennan. I ain't walking 4 miles in the black of night. She carried the bowls to the basin. I'll sleep in your barn if you'll allow it. Be gone before sunrise. Sam rubbed his face. This woman had answers for everything. Calm, practical answers that made his objections sound foolish. The barn leaks, he said. I've slept in worse. There's snakes. I've met worse. Mrs. Chen might not have work. Then I'll find something else. Maggie turned from the basin dish towel in her hands. Mr. Brennan, I've traveled 2,000 miles to get away from people who thought they knew what was best for me. I ain't gonna stand here and have you do the same. You want me gone, I'll go. But don't pretend it's for my sake. The words hit harder than they should have. Sam stood his chair scraping against the floor. You don't know nothing about me, he said. I know you eat alone. I know you keep a woman's apron folded in a drawer like a holy relic. I know you've got dust on the mantel, but not on the picture frame. Her voice softened. I know grief when I see it, Mr. Brennan. I've been wearing it myself for 4 years. Sam's throat closed up. The picture frame. Ruth and Thomas, the only photograph he had of them taken the summer before the war. He cleaned that frame every night before bed, touched the glass like he could reach through and hold them one more time. You lost someone, he said. It wasn't a question. My husband, Daniel. Maggie hung the dish towel on its hook. Mining accident in Pennsylvania. Cave-in took him and 14 other men. They never found the bodies. I'm sorry. So am I. She crossed her arms over her chest. His family blamed me for not keeping him home that day. Said I should have seen the signs, should have known something was wrong. Spent 4 years telling me everything I did wrong. Everything I should have done different. That ain't fair. No, but fair don't seem to matter much when grief's got hold of people. Maggie met his eyes. That's why I left. Packed what I could carry and bought a train ticket to the farthest place I could find. Figured if I was going to be alone, I might as well be alone somewhere new. Sam understood that kind of running. He'd been doing it for 12 years. Different direction, same destination. The room in the back, he said before he could stop himself. It's got a bed. Used to be for guests. Maggie's eyebrows rose. Mr. Brennan? One night. Tomorrow you go to town, find work, find somewhere proper to stay. His voice came out rougher than he intended. I ain't offering nothing but a roof. I ain't asking for nothing but a roof. They stood there, two strangers who'd found each other's edges without meaning to. Sam should have felt invaded, violated. Some woman walking into his carefully guarded life and setting up camp like she had every right. Instead, he felt something he hadn't felt in 12 years. Not alone. Bed's probably dusty, he said. I'll shake out the blankets. Door don't lock. I'll push a chair against it. I'll be up before dawn. So will I. Sam grabbed his hat from the peg by the door. I need to check the horses. I'll clean up here. He left without looking back. The night air hit him like cold water, clearing his head just enough to realize what he'd done. He'd let a stranger into his home, let her cook his food, wash his dishes, sleep under his roof. Ruth would have laughed, would have said it served him right for being so stubborn, so closed off, so determined to die alone in a house that had stopped being a home the day she left it. Sam checked the horses, checked the barn, checked the fence line and the water trough, and every other thing he could think of that didn't require going back inside. But the night got cold, and his body ached. And eventually, there was nothing left to check. When he pushed open the door, the fire had burned low. Maggie was nowhere to be seen. The kitchen gleamed like it hadn't in years, every surface wiped clean, every dish in its proper place. On the table sat a cup of coffee still warm. Beside it, a note written in careful handwriting, For the morning. Thank you for your kindness. M. Sam picked up the cup. The coffee was strong and bitter, exactly how he liked it. How had she known? Lucky guess. Had to be. Nobody could read a man that well from one meal and a few hard words. He drank it standing up, listening to the silence of his house. But it wasn't quite silent anymore. He could hear movement from the back room. The creak of the bed as Maggie settled in. A soft sigh that might have been exhaustion or relief or something in between. For 12 years, this house had held nothing but his breathing and his memories. Tonight, it held someone else. Someone alive. Someone who'd walked in uninvited and somehow made the place feel less like a tomb. Sam finished the coffee and washed the cup himself. Put it back on the shelf next to the bowls his mother had given Ruth as a wedding present. Bowls that Maggie had touched like they were just bowls, not relics of a life he'd lost. He went to his bedroom, lay down on the mattress fully clothed, stared at the ceiling, and listened to the house settle around him. Sleep didn't come, but something else did. A feeling he couldn't name creeping up through the cracks in his armor. Something like hope, something like fear. Sam closed his eyes and waited for dawn. The sun wasn't up yet when Sam heard her moving. Soft footsteps, quiet as a woman trying not to wake anyone. The creak of the back door. A moment of silence, then the rhythmic sound of the pump handle. He got out of bed. Maggie stood at the pump filling a bucket. She'd already dressed her hair pinned up tight, her bag sitting by the porch like she was ready to leave at a moment's notice. "You're up early," Sam said. She didn't startle, just kept pumping. "Told you I would be." "Coffee." "Already made. It's on the stove." Sam went back inside. The kitchen smelled like coffee and biscuits. Biscuits. When had she made biscuits? The plate sat on the table, steam still rising, golden brown and perfect. "You didn't have to do that," he said when she came in with the water. "I know." Maggie set the bucket down. "But I ain't the kind of woman who takes charity without giving something back. One night's sleep ain't charity. It is when you've got nowhere else to go." They ate breakfast in silence that felt different from the night before. Easier. Like they'd crossed some invisible line and couldn't cross back. Sam found himself watching her. The way she broke her biscuit in half butter first, then jam. The way she held her coffee cup with both hands, like she was warming herself, even though the summer morning was already heating up. The way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't looking. "I'll take you to town," he said. "That ain't necessary." "It's 4 miles. I walked it once. In the dark. On a road you didn't know. With no water and no food." Sam pushed back from the table. "I'm taking you to town." Maggie opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. "All right? All right. You're stubborn as a mule, Mr. Brennan. I ain't got the energy to fight you this early in the morning." Something that might have been a smile tugged at Sam's mouth. Smart woman. The ride to town took less than an hour. Maggie sat beside him on the wagon seat, her bag between her feet, her eyes taking in everything. The mountains in the distance, the endless stretch of grassland, the way the light hit the Wyoming dirt and turned it gold. "It's beautiful out here," she said quietly. "It's hard out here." Maybe that's what makes it beautiful. Sam didn't have an answer for that. Medicine Bow wasn't much of a town. One main street, a general store, a church, a saloon, and a handful of houses clustered together like they were afraid of the open space around them. The boarding house sat at the end of the street, a 2-story building with a hand-painted sign, "Chen's Rooms, clean beds, fair prices." Sam pulled the wagon to a stop. "Mrs. Chen's a good woman. Doesn't ask questions. Doesn't judge." "Sounds like someone else I know." Sam looked at her. Maggie was smiling, small, but real, and something in his chest shifted. "Good luck, Mrs. Crawford." "Maggie," she said. "After last night, I think we're past formalities." "Maggie, then." He nodded toward the boarding house. "Go on, before the heat gets worse." She climbed down from the wagon, her bag in her hand. At the door, she turned back. Mr. Brennan? Sam, he said before he could stop himself. Her smile widened. Sam, thank you. Not just for the bed, for not making me feel like a burden. You weren't. I was. I just didn't let myself act like one. She paused. Maybe we're both better at carrying weight than putting it down. She went inside before he could respond. Sam sat there longer than he should have, watching the door, waiting for something he couldn't name. Then he picked up the reins and turned the wagon toward home. The house felt emptier than it had yesterday. Same four walls. Same silence. Same dust settling on everything he'd stopped caring about. But now there were 2 clean bowls on the shelf. A pot that didn't smell like burnt beans. A cup that someone else had filled. Sam walked to the back room. The bed was made corners, tucked tight, blankets smooth. On the pillow sat a small piece of paper. He picked it up. My mother always said a house ain't a home until someone makes it one. Thank you for letting me try, even if just for a night. M. Sam read the words 3 times. Then he folded the paper and put it in his pocket next to the letter Ruth had written him before she died. 2 pieces of paper. 2 women who'd left their mark on his life. He walked back to the kitchen and looked at the picture on the mantel. Ruth smiled out at him. Thomas on her lap, both of them frozen in a moment that had ended 12 years ago. What am I supposed to do? He asked the empty room. The room didn't answer. But for the first time in 12 years, the silence didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like a question. 3 days passed. Sam threw himself into work, pushing harder than his body wanted, trying to fill his head with something other than red-brown hair and whiskey-colored eyes. It didn't work. On the 4th day, he rode into town for supplies. Told himself it was necessary. Told himself he wasn't looking for anything. He found her at the general store. Maggie stood at the counter. Her jaw set, her hands flat on the wood. Across from her, Harold Blackwood, owner of the store, owner of half the territory, owner of an attitude that made Sam's fists clench, was shaking his head. I'm sorry, Mrs. Crawford. I ain't got work for someone like you. Someone like me? A woman. Alone. With no references I can verify. Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. Surely you understand. I understand plenty, Mr. Blackwood. I understand you've got a help-wanted sign in your window. I understand I'm qualified for the work, and I understand you're turning me down for reasons that ain't got nothing to do with my abilities. Now, Mrs. Crawford, it's because I stayed at the Brennan ranch, isn't it? The store went quiet. Sam stopped in the doorway, unseen, his blood running hot. Blackwood's face hardened. What you do with your evenings is your business, ma'am. But this is a respectable establishment. I can't have people talking. People are already talking. That didn't stop you from letting half the men in this town run tabs they'll never pay. That's different. How? Because they're men. Blackwood leaned forward. And you, Mrs. Crawford, are a woman who spent the night with a man who ain't her husband. In my experience, women like that bring nothing but trouble. Sam stepped into the store. That's so. Blackwood's head snapped toward him. Maggie's eyes went wide. Mr. Brennan? Blackwood's voice smoothed out like oil on water. I didn't see you there. I noticed. Sam walked to the counter and stood beside Maggie. You got a problem with Mrs. Crawford. Just explaining my business policy. Your policy is turning away good workers because of gossip. My policy is protecting my reputation. Funny? Sam picked up a bag of flour, slow and deliberate. I always thought your reputation was already pretty well set, Harold. Something about foreclosing on the Patterson place while old Jack was burying his wife. Blackwood's face went red. That was a business decision. So is this. Sam set the flour on the counter. But I'm sure the good folks of Medicine Bow will understand when I take my business to the next town over. And when I tell every rancher in the territory that Harold Blackwood can't tell the difference between a proper widow and a scandal. You wouldn't. Try me. The silence stretched between them. Maggie stood frozen, her eyes moving from Sam to Blackwood and back. Finally, Blackwood looked away. Fine, she can have the job, but any trouble, and she's out. There won't be trouble. Sam tossed coins on the counter. Add the flour to my account, and while you're at it, add some respect for the women in this town. Lord knows it's running low. He picked up the flour and walked out. Maggie followed her footsteps quick behind him. You didn't have to do that, she said when they reached the wagon. I know. He's the most powerful man in town. You just made an enemy. I've had enemies before. Sam loaded the flour into the wagon. Blackwood's got money and influence, but he ain't got the kind of backbone that survives real trouble. Maggie crossed her arms. And you do. I survived the war. I survived losing my wife and son. I survived 12 years of people like Blackwood looking down their noses at me. Sam turned to face her. Making a scene in a general store don't even register. Why'd you do it? Do what? Defend me. You barely know me. Sam looked at this woman who'd walked into his life uninvited and somehow made him care about something again. The summer sun lit up her hair like fire. Her jaw was set stubborn as the day she'd stood at his stove and refused to back down. Because you fed me when you had nothing, he said. Because you slept in my house and made me coffee and didn't expect anything in return. Because you're the first person in 12 years who looked at me like I was still alive. Maggie's expression softened. Sam, don't. He held up a hand. I ain't looking for gratitude or promises or whatever you're about to say. I couldn't stand there and let him talk to you like that. Not you. The words hung between them heavier than he'd intended. Maggie stepped closer. You're a good man, Samuel Brennan. No, I ain't. Yes, you are. And that's what scares you most, isn't it? Being good means caring, and caring means having something to lose. Sam's throat tightened. This woman saw too much, cut too close. I should get back to the ranch, he said. Will I see you again? The question was simple. The answer wasn't. I reckon you will, Sam said finally. This town's too small for avoidance. Maggie smiled, and something in his chest cracked open just a little wider. Then I'll see you soon, Sam. She walked back into the general store. Sam watched her go, then climbed into his wagon and headed for home. The road stretched out ahead of him, long and dusty and familiar. But nothing felt familiar anymore. A stranger had set 2 plates on his table. And now Samuel Brennan was starting to wonder if maybe, just maybe, he'd been eating alone long enough. A week passed before Sam found an excuse to go back to town. He told himself the fence posts couldn't wait, told himself the coffee supply was running low, told himself every lie a man tells when he's trying not to admit the truth. The truth walked out of Blackwood's store the moment his wagon pulled up. Maggie carried a crate of supplies, her sleeves rolled up, her face flushed from work. She stopped when she saw him. Sam. Maggie. They stood there like 2 people who'd forgotten how words worked. You need something from the store, she finally asked. Fence posts, coffee. Fence posts are around back, coffee's on the 3rd shelf. I know where the coffee is. Then why are you standing there? Sam climbed down from the wagon. Checking on you. I don't need checking on. Didn't say you did. Said I was doing it anyway. Maggie set down the crate. You're a stubborn man, Samuel Brennan. So I've been told. The door to the store swung open. Harold Blackwood stepped out, his eyes narrowing when he saw Sam. Mr. Brennan, back so soon. Needed supplies. I'm sure you did. Blackwood's gaze moved to Maggie. Mrs. Crawford, those supplies won't deliver themselves. Yes, Mr. Blackwood. She picked up the crate and walked toward the wagon waiting at the end of the street. Sam watched her go, his jaw tight. She's a good worker, Blackwood said. I'll give her that much. But But nothing, just making conversation. Blackwood smiled, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. Though I have to say it's interesting. You defending her honor one day, showing up to check on her the next. People might start to wonder. Let them wonder. Easy for you to say. You've got nothing left to lose. Blackwood leaned against the doorframe. But Mrs. Crawford? She's trying to build a new life here. Hard to do that when the most reclusive man in the territory keeps sniffing around. Sam stepped closer. You got something to say? Harold, say it plain. I'm saying leave her alone, for her sake if not yours. That her decision or yours? It's good advice. Take it or leave it. Sam held Blackwood's stare for a long moment. Then he walked past him into the store without another word. Inside, he gathered his supplies, slow, giving himself time to think. Blackwood was right about one thing. Every time Sam showed up, it drew attention to Maggie. Attention she didn't need. Attention that could cost her the foothold she was trying to build. But the thought of staying away sat wrong in his gut, like swallowing something rotten and pretending it tasted fine. He paid for his supplies and loaded the wagon. Maggie was nowhere in sight. Sam climbed up to the seat and picked up the reins. He was about to leave when a voice called out, "Mr. Brennan." He turned. Mrs. Chen stood on the porch of the boarding house, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "Ma'am, you have a minute." Sam tied off the reins and walked over. Mrs. Chen was small and weathered, her gray hair pulled back tight, her eyes sharp as broken glass. "What can I do for you?" he asked. "You can tell me what your intentions are." "Excuse me." "With Mrs. Crawford." Mrs. Chen didn't blink. "She's staying in my house, eating at my table. I got a right to know if someone's going to cause her trouble." "I ain't looking to cause trouble." "Then what are you looking for?" Sam didn't have an answer. Mrs. Chen nodded like his silence told her everything. "That woman's been through hard times," she said. "Harder than she lets on. She don't need a man who ain't sure what he wants." "I never said—" "You didn't have to." Mrs. Chen uncrossed her arms. "I've been watching people for 60 years, Mr. Brennan. I know what it looks like when a man's heart is fighting his head. Just make sure your heart wins before you drag her into the battle." She went back inside before he could respond. Sam stood there, the summer heat pressing down on him. Mrs. Chen's words pressing harder. What did he want? He'd spent 12 years not wanting anything, not wanting company, not wanting comfort, not wanting to feel anything that might remind him of everything he'd lost. And now a woman with red-brown hair and whiskey eyes had walked into his life, and suddenly he wanted things he'd forgotten how to name. Sam went back to his wagon and drove home. But Mrs. Chen's question followed him the whole way. Bad. The answer came 3 days later in the worst way possible. Sam was mending fence on the south pasture when he heard the horse approaching. Fast. Too fast for a social call. He grabbed his rifle and turned. Ezekiel Washington pulled up hard, his horse lathered and blowing. Zeke was Sam's closest neighbor and one of the few men in the territory Sam trusted with more than small talk. "Sam, we got a problem." "What kind?" "The kind that's standing in front of the church right now telling anyone who'll listen that Maggie Crawford is a woman of loose morals." Sam's blood went cold. "Who?" "Eleanor Pritchard, Blackwood's sister." Zeke's jaw tightened. "She's got half the town women riled up. They're talking about running Maggie out." Sam was on his horse before Zeke finished speaking. They rode hard into town. Sam could hear the commotion before he saw it. Voices raised. Words like scandal and improper and Christian decency floating on the hot summer air. A crowd had gathered in front of the church. At the center stood Eleanor Pritchard. Her face pinched with righteous fury, her finger pointing at someone Sam couldn't see. He pushed through the crowd. Maggie stood alone, her back straight, her chin high, facing down a dozen angry women, like she was made of iron instead of flesh. "I've done nothing wrong," she was saying. "I stayed one night under Mr. Brennan's roof because I had nowhere else to go." "One night that we know of," Eleanor shot back. "Who's to say it was only once? Who's to say what really happened behind those closed doors? My word says it, and his. The word of a stranger and a man who's been living like a hermit for over a decade." Eleanor laughed. "Forgive me if I don't find that convincing." "Then don't. Your conviction ain't my concern." Maggie's voice stayed steady. "I came to this town to work and build an honest life. That's what I've been doing. If you've got proof otherwise, show it. If you don't, then I suggest you find better ways to spend your time than spreading rumors about people you don't know." The crowd murmured. Some nodded. Others looked uncomfortable. Eleanor's face went red. "How dare you speak to me that way? Do you know who I am?" "I know you're Harold Blackwood's sister. I know you've never worked a day in your life. And I know that tearing down other women is the only way you've found to feel important." Maggie stepped forward. "But I ain't the enemy, Mrs. Pritchard. I'm just a widow trying to survive. Same as plenty of women in this crowd." Sam pushed to the front. "That's enough." Every head turned toward him. Eleanor's eyes widened, then narrowed. "Mr. Brennan, come to defend your guest. Come to put a stop to this nonsense." Sam moved to stand beside Maggie. "Mrs. Crawford stayed at my ranch one night because she had nowhere else to go. I slept in my room. She slept in the guest room. Nothing happened except she cooked me supper and left in the morning. And we're supposed to believe that. You're supposed to mind your own business." Sam's voice dropped low. "But since you can't seem to do that, let me make something clear. Maggie Crawford is under my protection. Anyone who wants to cause her trouble can take it up with me directly. Protection." Eleanor's smile turned ugly. "Is that what you're calling it now?" "I'm calling it what it is. Common decency toward a woman who deserves better than being dragged through the mud by people who ain't fit to shine her shoes." The crowd went silent. Maggie touched Sam's arm. "Sam, don't. Don't what tell the truth." He looked at Eleanor. "I spent 3 years in the Union Army. I've faced down Confederate cannons and watched men die in front of me. You think I'm scared of a woman with too much time and too little kindness?" Eleanor's face drained of color. "You'll regret this." "I regret a lot of things. Standing up for what's right ain't one of them." He took Maggie's hand, didn't even think about it, just did it, and led her through the crowd. People parted for them like water around a stone. Behind them, Eleanor's voice rose sharp and bitter. "This isn't over, Samuel Brennan. You've made your choice. Now you'll live with the consequences." Sam didn't look back. They walked until they reached the boarding house. Only then did he realize he was still holding Maggie's hand. He let go like he'd been burned. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" "For making it worse." Maggie shook her head. "You didn't make it worse. You made it clear." She looked at him, and something in her eyes made his chest hurt. "No one stood up for me like that since Daniel died." "Someone should have." "But they didn't. You did." She reached out and touched his face just for a moment. "Thank you, Sam." He caught her hand before she could pull away, held it against his cheek, felt the calluses on her palm, the warmth of her skin, the realness of her. "Maggie, don't." She pulled her hand back gently. "Not like this. Not because you feel obligated." "That ain't why." "Then why?" Sam didn't have words for it. Didn't have words for the way his heart raced when she was near. The way her voice played in his head long after she stopped talking. The way she'd somehow become the first thing he thought about in the morning and the last thing before he slept. "Because you're the first person in 12 years who made me feel like I wasn't already dead," he said. Maggie's breath caught. Her eyes filled with tears, she blinked away. "Sam, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know." He turned and walked away before she could respond. Before he could say something else that would change everything. Before he could admit that standing beside her in front of that crowd had felt more right than anything in his empty, careful life. The consequences came faster than he expected. 2 days later, Sam rode to Blackwood's store for supplies. The door was locked. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again. A sign appeared in the window, held up by a hand he couldn't see, "Closed for private business." Sam went to the grain supply. Same sign. The blacksmith. Closed. The feed store. Closed. Every business in Medicine Bow had shut its doors the moment they saw him coming. Sam stood in the middle of the empty street, understanding settling over him like a funeral shroud. This was Blackwood's doing. This was the price of standing up for Maggie. He was being frozen out. The saloon door opened. Zeke stepped out, his face grim. "Been trying to buy supplies all morning," Zeke said. "They won't sell to me either." "Why, you didn't do anything." "I stood with you at the water meeting last year. That's enough for Blackwood." Zeke crossed his arms. "He's sending a message, Sam. Fall in line or starve." "I ain't falling in line." "Then you better figure out another way to feed your cattle, because this town is closed to both of us." Sam's hands curled into fists. "There's got to be someone." "There's Mrs. Chen. She'll sell to anyone who's got money." Zeke paused. "And there's the trading post over in Elk Ridge. 20 miles, but they don't care about Medicine Bow politics." 20 miles. Better than nothing." Sam nodded slowly. 20 miles. A full day's ride each way. But it was possible. It was survival. "Thanks, Zeke." "Don't thank me yet. Blackwood's not done. This is just the opening move." "What else can he do?" Zeke's expression darkened. "He can make sure Maggie loses her job. Make sure Mrs. Chen loses her boarding house license. Make sure everyone who helps you pays a price they can't afford." He wouldn't. He bought old Jack's ranch for half what it was worth while Jack was grieving his wife. He foreclosed on the Martinez family because they were 2 weeks late on a payment. Zeke shook his head. "Harold Blackwood don't have a conscience, Sam. He's got ledgers. And right now, you're on the wrong side of his books." Sam thought about Maggie, about Mrs. Chen, about everyone who'd shown him kindness in the past week. "What do I do?" he asked. "You fight, or you run." Zeke put a hand on his shoulder. "But whatever you decide, decide fast. Blackwood's already 3 moves ahead." Sam found Maggie behind the general store, stacking boxes in the storage shed. Her face was pale, her movements sharp and angry. "You heard," he said. "Blackwood fired me this morning." She threw a box onto the pile harder than necessary. "Said my presence was disrupting his business. Said customers didn't want to be served by a woman of questionable character." "Maggie, don't." She spun to face him. "Don't you dare apologize for what you did. I'd rather be fired with dignity than employed in shame." "I cost you your job." "Blackwood cost me my job. You just gave him the excuse he was looking for." Maggie wiped her hands on her apron. "Mrs. Chen warned me this might happen. Said Blackwood's been trying to drive out anyone who doesn't bow to him for years. What are you going to do? Find other work. There's got to be someone in this territory who needs a cook or a cleaner or a, come work for me." The words fell out before Sam could stop them. Maggie stared at him. "What?" "I need help on the ranch. Real help. Someone to cook, keep the house, handle the books." Sam's heart pounded against his ribs. "I can't pay much, but you'd have room and board. You'd be safe." "Sam, that's exactly what they're accusing us of." "Then let them accuse. What's the difference?" He stepped closer. "They've already made up their minds. Might as well give them something real to talk about." "You don't mean that." "I mean every word." Sam took her hands. "Maggie, I've spent 12 years living alone, eating alone, waking up alone, and every single day of it felt like penance for sins I didn't commit. His voice cracked. He kept going anyway. Then you walked into my house. You cooked me supper. You looked at me like I was still a person instead of a ghost. He squeezed her hands. I ain't asking you to love me. I ain't asking for anything except the chance to not be alone anymore. Can you give me that? Maggie's eyes glistened. Her lips trembled. Sam, if I come to your ranch, people will say, I don't care what people say. I do, because once they say it, they can't unsay it. And if this doesn't work out, if we can't stand each other after a month, I'll be ruined. Completely. No one in the territory will hire me. Then we'll make it work. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise to try. Sam released her hands. That's all I've got, Maggie. The promise to try. If it ain't enough, I understand. The silence stretched between them. Sam could hear his own heartbeat, could feel the summer heat pressing down, could sense everything he'd built to protect himself crumbling like old mortar. Maggie looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached up and touched his face again. This time she didn't pull away. When do I start? She asked. News traveled fast in Medicine Bow. By the time Sam's wagon rolled out of town with Maggie beside him, half the territory knew she was moving to the Brennan ranch. By sunset, the story had grown into something unrecognizable. Sam heard the whispers the next time he rode into Elk Ridge for supplies. That's the man who took in the widow. Heard she was a saloon girl back east. Heard he paid her way from Pennsylvania. Heard they're living in sin under God's blue sky. Sam ignored them all, loaded his supplies, paid his money, rode home. Maggie was waiting on the porch when he got back. She'd spent the day cleaning, organizing, making the house look like something other than a monument to grief. How bad? She asked. Bad enough. I heard from Mrs. Chen. Maggie handed him a cup of water. She says Blackwood's telling everyone you seduced me, that you planned this from the moment I arrived. Seduced you. Apparently you're quite the mastermind. A small smile crossed her face. Personally, I think you couldn't seduce a woman if your life depended on it. Sam choked on his water. Excuse me. You can barely hold a conversation without looking like you want to bolt. Seduction requires charm, Sam. You've got the charm of a fence post. A fence post. A very handsome fence post, but still. Sam set down the cup. Did you just call me handsome? Did I? Maggie's smile widened. Must have been the heat. She walked into the house before he could respond. Sam stood there, water dripping down his chin, feeling something he hadn't felt in 12 years. Happy. The feeling lasted 3 days. On the 4th day, a rider came to the ranch. Not Zeke. Not Mrs. Chen. A stranger in an expensive suit sitting on a horse too fine for Wyoming dirt. Sam grabbed his rifle. Can I help you? I'm looking for Margaret Crawford. The stranger's voice was smooth, educated. Wrong. I believe she's staying here. Who's asking? The stranger smiled. Her brother-in-law. I've come to take her home. Sam's blood turned to ice. Behind him the door opened. Maggie stepped onto the porch and her face went white as bone. James, she whispered. Hello, Margaret. The stranger tipped his hat. Did you really think you could run forever? Sam didn't lower his rifle. You got about 10 seconds to explain why I shouldn't run you off my property. James Crawford dismounted with the ease of a man who'd never done real work in his life. His boots were polished. His suit was pressed. Everything about him screamed money and power and the certainty that both would get him whatever he wanted. I'm not here for trouble, mister. James waited. Brennan, and trouble's exactly what you brought. Sam. Maggie's voice came out strangled. Please. You know this man. He's my husband's brother. Maggie stepped off the porch, her hands shaking. James, how did you find me? Did you really think you could disappear, Margaret? James smiled, but his eyes stayed cold. Father hired Pinkerton detectives. They tracked you from Pennsylvania to Chicago to Omaha to here. He looked around with barely concealed disgust. Though I must say I expected better, even from you. I ain't going back. That's not your decision anymore. Sam stepped forward. Seems to me it's exactly her decision. And who are you to involve yourself in family matters? James's gaze swept over Sam's worn clothes, his calloused hands the rifle that hadn't wavered. The hired help. I'm the man holding the gun. That's all you need to know. Sam, don't. Maggie moved between them. James, whatever you came here to say it and leave. I came to bring you home. This is my home now. James laughed. The sound made Sam's trigger finger itch. This... James gestured at the house, the barn, the endless stretch of Wyoming dirt. This is nowhere. This is nothing. You left a life of comfort for this. I left a prison for this. Maggie's voice hardened. Your family wanted to control everything I did, where I went, who I spoke to, how I grieved. That ain't comfort, James. That's captivity. We were protecting you. From what? From living my own life. Maggie shook her head. Daniel's been dead 4 years. 4 years of your family telling me I owed them my future because they gave me a past. I don't owe you nothing. Actually, you do. James reached into his coat. Sam's rifle snapped up. Easy, Mr. Brennan. It's just paper. He pulled out a folded document and held it toward Maggie. She didn't take it. What is that? Father's will. He died 3 weeks ago. Maggie's face went pale. William's dead. Heart gave out. Doctor said it was the stress of losing his son, and then watching his daughter-in-law abandon the family. James's voice dripped with accusation. He spent his last months wondering where you'd gone, wondering if you were safe, wondering why you'd hurt him like that. That ain't fair. Fair. James stepped closer. You want to talk about fair? Father left you everything, Margaret. The house in Philadelphia, the mining operation, the investments, $40,000 in cash and property. Sam felt the number hit him like a physical blow. 40,000. More money than he'd see in 10 lifetimes. Maggie stood frozen. Why? Because despite everything he loved you. Because Daniel loved you. Because he believed you'd come back and honor your husband's memory properly. James held out the document again. All you have to do is sign. Come back to Philadelphia. Live in the family home for 2 years. Help manage Daniel's estate. And if I refuse, then the money goes to charity. The mining operation gets sold, and 300 workers lose their jobs because you were too proud to accept your responsibilities. Sam watched Maggie's face crumble, watched the weight of that number press down on her shoulders. 300 workers. 300 families. That's blackmail, Sam said. That's reality. James didn't look at him. Margaret, I know we had our differences. I know the family was hard on you after Daniel died. But this is your chance to make things right, to honor your husband, to help the people who depended on him. By giving up my freedom. By accepting your duty. James softened his voice. 2 years. That's all we're asking. 2 years in Philadelphia, then you're free to do whatever you want. Go wherever you want. You'll have enough money to live like a queen for the rest of your life. Maggie looked at Sam. Her eyes were wet, her jaw tight, her whole body trembling with a war he couldn't fight for her. Can I think about it? She asked. I need an answer by tomorrow morning. I'm staying at the boarding house in town. James tucked the document back into his coat. I hope you'll make the right choice, Margaret, for everyone's sake. He mounted his horse and rode off without another word. The silence he left behind was worse than the conversation. Maggie! Sam reached for her. She stepped back. Don't. Talk to me. And say what? Her voice cracked. That I don't want to go. That the thought of spending 2 more years under their control makes me want to scream. That I finally found something worth staying for. And now I have to choose between my freedom and 300 families. You don't have to choose anything. Yes, I do. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I spent 4 years being told I wasn't good enough, wasn't grieving right, wasn't honoring Daniel's memory, wasn't measuring up to what a Crawford widow should be. She pressed her hands to her face. I thought I escaped. I thought I was finally free. You are free. No, I ain't. I'll never be free of them. Maggie dropped her hands. James is right about one thing. 300 workers, Sam. 300 people who'll lose everything if I don't sign that paper. That ain't your fault. It'll feel like my fault. Every single day it'll feel like my fault. Sam wanted to argue, wanted to tell her the Crawford family was using guilt as a weapon, wanted to point out that selling a mining operation wasn't the same as firing everyone. But he looked at Maggie's face and saw a woman being torn apart, and he knew that nothing he said would matter until she made peace with herself. What do you want to do? He asked quietly. I want to stay here. I want to wake up tomorrow and cook breakfast and work in the garden and pretend James Crawford never found me. Maggie wiped her eyes. But wanting something don't make it right. And going back to Philadelphia. That feels right. It feels like obligation, duty, responsibility. She laughed bitterly. All the things I was raised to value more than my own happiness. Your happiness matters. Does it? More than 300 jobs, more than honoring my husband's memory, more than doing what everyone expects. Sam crossed the distance between them and took her hands, felt them shaking, felt her whole body trembling with exhaustion and fear and something that looked a lot like despair. Maggie, listen to me. I ain't good with words, never have been. But I'm gonna try to say something, and I need you to hear it. She looked up at him. I spent 12 years believing I didn't deserve happiness. 12 years punishing myself for surviving when Ruth and Thomas didn't. 12 years building walls so high I couldn't see over them anymore. Sam's voice roughened. Then you walked into my kitchen. You cooked me supper. You looked at me like I was still worth looking at. Sam, I ain't asking you to stay for me. I ain't got the right to ask that. But I'm asking you to think about what you really owe. He squeezed her hands. You didn't kill Daniel. You didn't cause William's heart attack. You didn't create the situation with the mining operation. The Crawfords did all that themselves, and now they want to make you pay for their mistakes. It ain't that simple. It's exactly that simple. They're using guilt to control you, same as they've been doing for 4 years. Sam released her hands. If you decide to go back, I'll understand. I'll hate it, but I'll understand. But don't go back because you think you owe them something. Go back because it's what you actually want. Maggie stood there for a long moment. Then she turned and walked into the house without a word. Sam watched her go. Felt something in his chest crack open. Felt all the hope he'd been building crumble like dry earth. He stayed outside until dark, checked the horses, fixed a fence rail that didn't need fixing, did everything he could to avoid going inside and facing whatever decision Maggie had made. When he finally pushed open the door, the house was quiet. A single lamp burned on the table. Beside it sat a piece of paper. Sam picked it up with shaking hands. I need to think. Don't follow me. M. Her bag was gone. The back room was empty. Maggie had left without saying goodbye. Sam crumpled the note in his fist and felt something inside him break. He found her at dawn. She was sitting by the creek that ran through his property, her knees pulled up to her chest, her eyes fixed on the water. She'd been there all night. Sam could tell by the way she held herself, exhausted, wrung out, emptied of everything but the decision she'd been wrestling with. You scared me, he said. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just don't run off like that again. Maggie looked up at him. Her face was tear-streaked, her eyes red-rimmed, but something in them had changed. Something had settled. I'm not going back, she said. Sam's heart stopped. What? I'm not going back to Philadelphia. I'm not signing their papers. I'm not letting them control me anymore. But the workers. I spent all night thinking about those workers. Maggie stood slowly. And you know what I realized? The Crawfords own a dozen businesses. They've got money enough to keep that mining operation running without selling it. James told me they'd sell it if I didn't sign because he knew it would work. Because he knew I'd feel responsible. Maggie. But I ain't responsible. I didn't build that company. I didn't make the decisions that got it into trouble. I didn't gamble with people's livelihoods and then demand someone else fix my mistakes. Her voice grew stronger. The Crawfords can save those jobs themselves if they want to. They just don't want to. They want me to do it so they can control me while I do. Sam felt the tightness in his chest ease. You sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. Maggie stepped toward him. Sam, I came to Wyoming to find out who I was without Daniel, without the Crawford name, without everyone telling me who I should be. She took his hands. I found out I'm someone who can survive 3 weeks on a train with nothing but hope. Someone who can walk into a stranger's house and make supper instead of begging for help. Someone who can stand up to Eleanor Pritchard and Harold Blackwood and everyone else who tried to tear me down. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. And I found out I'm someone who can love again, even when I thought that part of me was dead. Sam's breath caught. Maggie. I love you, Samuel Brennan. I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you lowered that rifle. Maybe when you stood up for me in front of the whole town. Maybe when you asked me to stay, not because you needed a housekeeper, but because you needed me. She released his hands and touched his face. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing this life. I'm choosing to be happy, even if it costs me everything else. Sam pulled her into his arms and held her tight, felt her heart beating against his chest, felt her tears soaking through his shirt, felt 12 years of loneliness finally starting to heal. I love you too, he said into her hair. I've been trying not to, trying to protect myself, but I can't anymore. Maggie pulled back to look at him, then stopped trying. He kissed her, soft at first, then deeper tasting salt and hope and the promise of something neither of them had expected to find. When they finally broke apart, the sun was rising over the mountains. A new day, a new beginning. But the beginning didn't last long. They were walking back to the house when Sam saw the riders, 4 of them coming fast from the direction of town. His stomach dropped. Get inside, he told Maggie. Sam, get inside and don't come out until I tell you it's safe. She ran. Sam grabbed his rifle and stood his ground. The riders pulled up hard. James Crawford was in front, his face twisted with fury. Behind him rode Harold Blackwood and 2 men Sam didn't recognize. Big men. Mean-looking men. The kind of men who got paid to hurt people. Where is she? James demanded. Off my property. I'm not leaving without her. Then you're not leaving. Sam raised the rifle. I told you yesterday. Maggie makes her own choices. She chose to stay. She chose wrong. That ain't for you to decide. James dismounted. The 2 big men dismounted with him. Blackwood stayed on his horse, watching with a satisfied smile. Mr. Brennan, I'm going to give you one chance. James's voice was calm, dangerous. Bring Margaret out here right now, and we'll forget this happened. Don't, and I'll have these men tear your ranch apart until we find her. You try that, and you'll be dead before you take 2 steps. Maybe, but my men will finish what I started. James nodded toward Blackwood. And Harold here has already agreed to buy your property at auction after you're gone. Either way, you lose. Sam's finger tightened on the trigger. You'd kill a man over this? I'd kill a man who stole what belongs to my family. James stepped forward. Margaret Crawford is our responsibility, our property, and no dirt-poor rancher is going to keep her from fulfilling her obligations. She ain't property. She's whatever we say she is. The door opened behind Sam. Maggie stepped out, her chin high, her eyes blazing. "No," she said. "I ain't." "Margaret, get back inside." "I'm done hiding, Sam." Maggie walked past him and stopped 10 feet from James. "You want me? Here I am. But I ain't going anywhere with you. You don't have a choice. I've got the only choice that matters. My choice." Maggie pulled something from her pocket. Sam couldn't see what it was, but James went pale when he recognized it. "Where did you get that?" "From William's desk, the day before I left Philadelphia." Maggie held up a small leather journal. "Your father kept records, James, detailed records, about the mine, about the accidents, about the bribes he paid to keep inspectors quiet." James's face went white. "That's private property. It's evidence. Evidence that the Crawford family knew their mines were unsafe and kept working them anyway. Evidence that Daniel died because your father cared more about profits than safety." Maggie's voice shook with fury. "You want to drag me back to Philadelphia? Go ahead. But I'll take this journal straight to every newspaper in the city. I'll tell them exactly what kind of men the Crawfords really are." "You wouldn't. Try me." The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. James looked at the journal, looked at Maggie, looked at Sam with his rifle still raised. Then he smiled. Cold. Calculating. "Fine," he said. "Keep your journal. Keep your rancher. Keep your pathetic little life in this godforsaken territory." He mounted his horse. "But don't think this is over, Margaret. The Crawfords don't forget. And we don't forgive." He rode off. The two big men followed. Blackwood lingered a moment longer. "You've made a powerful enemy, Brennan," he said quietly. "James Crawford has friends in high places, friends who can make your life very difficult. I've survived worse." "Have you?" Blackwood's smile was thin and sharp. "We'll see." He turned his horse and rode after the others. Sam lowered his rifle. His hands were shaking. His whole body was shaking. Maggie stood there, clutching the journal, tears streaming down her face. "Is it true?" Sam asked. "What you said about Daniel?" She nodded. "I found the journal a week after he died. William begged me not to say anything. Promised he'd make the mine safer. Promised Daniel's death wouldn't be for nothing." Her voice broke. "He lied. He changed nothing. And now James wants me to go back and pretend none of it ever happened." Sam crossed to her and pulled her into his arms. "You did the right thing." "Did I?" Maggie laughed through her tears. "I just made enemies of one of the most powerful families in Pennsylvania. I just threatened to destroy everything they've built." "You defended yourself. You defended Daniel's memory." Sam tilted her chin up. "That ain't nothing. That's everything." "What happens now?" Sam looked toward the horizon where James and Blackwood had disappeared. "Now we fight." The attack came 3 nights later. Sam woke to the smell of smoke. He was out of bed before his mind caught up, his feet hitting the floor, his hand grabbing the rifle by instinct. "Maggie." She appeared in the doorway, her face pale in the darkness. "I smell it too." They ran outside together. The barn was burning. Flames licked up the sides, reaching toward the roof where the summer hay was stored. Inside, the horses screamed. "Get water from the pump!" Sam sprinted toward the barn. "I'll get the horses out." The heat hit him like a wall. He pulled his shirt over his nose and pushed through the door. Smoke choked his lungs. His eyes burned and watered. But he could hear the horses thrashing in their stalls, terrified, trapped. Sam found the first stall by feel. Threw open the gate. The horse bolted past him, nearly knocking him down. He moved to the second stall, the third. "Sam!" Maggie's voice cut through the roar of flames. "Get out! The roof's coming down. One more horse. Just one more." Sam found the last stall. His fingers fumbled with the latch. The metal was hot, searing his palm. He yanked it open and the horse burst free. He turned to run. The beam came down. Pain exploded through his shoulder. He went down hard, pinned under burning wood. Smoke filled his lungs. His vision went dark at the edges. Then hands grabbed him. Small hands, strong hands, pulling with desperate strength. "Don't you dare die on me, Samuel Brennan!" Maggie dragged him out of the barn. They collapsed on the ground together as the roof caved in behind them. "Sam! Sam, look at me!" He opened his eyes. Maggie's face swam above him, streaked with soot and tears. "I'm okay," he managed. "You're not okay. Your shoulder." "I'm alive. That's what matters." They lay there watching the barn burn. Everything Sam had built over 12 years gone in a matter of minutes. The hay, the tools, the tack, all of it turning to ash. "Blackwood," Sam said. "We don't know that." "Who else?" He sat up slowly, his shoulder screaming. "This is what he meant. Making our lives difficult. We need to tell the sheriff. Dawson won't do nothing. He's in Blackwood's pocket. Then we go over his head. There's got to be someone." "There ain't." Sam's voice came out flat. "Dead. This is how it works out here, Maggie. Men like Blackwood, they own everything. The law, the land, the people. And when they decide to crush someone, there ain't nobody who can stop them." Maggie grabbed his face with both hands. "Don't you do that. Don't you give up." "I ain't giving up. I'm seeing clear." "You're seeing defeat because that's what they want you to see." Her eyes blazed in the firelight. "Sam, they burned your barn. They killed your livestock. They're trying to break you. Are you gonna let them?" Sam looked at this woman who'd walked into his life and turned everything upside down. She was covered in soot. Her nightgown was torn. Her hands were blistered from dragging him out of a burning building, and she was still fighting. "No," he said. "I ain't gonna let them." "Then we fight back." "How?" "The same way I fought the Crawfords, with the truth." Maggie released his face. "Blackwood's been squeezing people in this territory for years. You told me yourself he foreclosed on old Jack while his wife was dying. He runs everyone out who won't bow to him. Someone's got to have proof." "Proof don't matter when he owns the sheriff." "Then we find someone he doesn't own." Sam thought about it. Through the pain and the smoke and the despair, he forced himself to think. "The territorial marshal," he said slowly. "He's based out of Cheyenne. Blackwood's got no reach there." "How far is Cheyenne?" 3 days' ride." "Then we ride." Sam shook his head. "I can't leave you here alone. Not after this." "I ain't staying here." Maggie stood and offered him her hand. "We go together. We bring the journal. We bring whatever evidence we can gather. And we make sure someone with real authority knows what's happening in Medicine Bow." Sam took her hand and let her pull him up. His shoulder throbbed, his lungs ached, but something in his chest felt stronger than it had in years. "You sure about this?" "I've been running for 4 years, Sam. I'm done running." Maggie squared her shoulders. "It's time to fight." They spent the rest of the night gathering what they could save. The horses had survived, scattered across the property, but unharmed. The house was untouched, and buried in Sam's bedroom in a lockbox under the floorboards was everything they needed. Documents, receipts, letters. 12 years of careful record-keeping that Sam had done out of habit, never thinking he'd need it. But now those records told a story of Blackwood buying up land at suspicious prices, of loans called in without warning, of families driven out and properties acquired for pennies on the dollar. "This is enough?" Maggie asked, looking at the pile of papers. "It's a start, but we need more." Sam winced as he moved his injured shoulder. "We need other people to testify. People Blackwood's hurt." "Will they talk?" "Some of them might, if they think there's a real chance of justice." At dawn, they rode to Zeke's ranch. Ezekiel Washington listened to their story without interrupting. When they finished, he sat back in his chair and let out a long breath. "You're talking about taking on Harold Blackwood." "I'm talking about stopping him," Sam said, "before he hurts anyone else." "And you think the territorial marshal will care, a bunch of ranchers complaining about a rich man?" I think he'll care about arson, about fraud, about a pattern of intimidation that's been going on for years. Sam leaned forward. Zeke, you've seen what Blackwood does. You've watched him squeeze out everyone who won't play his game. Don't you want to stop it? Zeke was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Maggie. You're part of this. I'm the one who suggested it. And you know what you're risking. Blackwood's got friends. Powerful friends. If this goes wrong, then it goes wrong. Maggie's voice didn't waver. But at least we tried. At least we didn't just accept what he's doing. Zeke nodded slowly. All right, I'm in. We need more people, Sam said. Who else might talk? Old Jack Patterson's still angry about losing his ranch. The Chen woman, her husband, died building Blackwood's railroad spur. The Martinez family got run out last spring. Zeke counted on his fingers. That's 4, including me. Maybe 5 if we can convince the widow Harper. Can you reach them? Bring them together? I can try, but it'll take time. We don't have time. Maggie pulled out the journal. James Crawford is still out there, and Blackwood knows we're planning something. Every day we wait is another day for them to plan their next move. Zeke looked at the journal. What's that? Insurance. Maggie tucked it back into her bag. Evidence that the Crawford family knew their minds were killing people and covered it up. If James tries anything else, I'll make sure every newspaper in the country knows about it. You'd really do that? I'd do whatever it takes to protect the people I love. Sam felt his chest tighten at the word. Love. She'd said it before, but hearing it again in this context made it feel real in a way it hadn't before. Give us 3 days, Zeke said. I'll gather who I can. We'll meet at your place. He stopped. Or what's left of it. The house is still standing, Sam said. That's enough. They rode back to the ranch as the sun climbed high. The smell of smoke still hung in the air. The skeleton of the barn stood like a blackened monument to everything they'd lost. But Maggie was right. They were still standing too. That night, Sam couldn't sleep. His shoulder ached despite the bandages Maggie had wrapped around it. His mind raced with plans and fears and the gnawing certainty that they were in over their heads. He found Maggie sitting on the porch, staring at the stars. Can't sleep either, he asked. Too much to think about. Sam sat down beside her. You could still leave. Take that journal and disappear. Start over somewhere Blackwood and Crawford can't find you. I could. Maggie didn't look at him. Is that what you want? I want you safe. Then stop trying to send me away. She finally turned to face him. Sam, I've spent my whole life being protected, first by my parents, then by Daniel, then by his family. Everyone always deciding what was best for me, what was safe for me, what I should want and feel and do. Her voice cracked. And you know what I learned? Being protected ain't the same as being loved. It's just another kind of prison. She reached for his hand. I don't want someone to protect me. I want someone to stand beside me, even when it's dangerous. Even when it's hard. Even when the whole world's trying to tear us apart. Sam squeezed her hand. I ain't good at standing beside people. I've been standing alone so long I forgot there was another way. Then let me teach you. He pulled her close and held her against his chest, felt her heartbeat, felt her warmth, felt all the fear and hope tangled together until he couldn't tell one from the other. I love you, he said. I should have said it clearer before. I love you, Margaret Crawford, and I ain't letting nobody take you away from me. She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. Then marry me. Sam's heart stopped. What? Marry me. Before we go to Cheyenne. Before we face whatever's coming. Maggie touched his face. I don't want to fight this battle as your housekeeper or your partner or your friend. I want to fight it as your wife. Maggie, if something goes wrong, then at least we'll have had this. At least we'll know we chose each other. She smiled through her tears. Sam, I've been a widow for 4 years. I know how short life is. I know how fast it can end. and I'm done waiting for some day that might never come." Sam looked at this woman who'd walked into his kitchen and changed everything. Who'd stood up to Blackwood and Crawford and the whole damn town. Who'd dragged him out of a burning barn and refused to let him give up. "Yes," he said. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." He kissed her forehead. "Tomorrow. We'll find the Reverend and—" "Not the Reverend. He's Blackwood's man." Maggie's smile widened. "But there's a circuit judge who comes through Elk Ridge every month. Mrs. Chen told me about him." "Elk Ridge is 20 miles. Then we ride 20 miles. Sam laughed. The sound surprised him. He couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed like that, full and real and unguarded. "You're something else, Margaret Crawford." "I'm about to be Margaret Brennan." She kissed him softly. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." They were married the next afternoon in the back room of the Elk Ridge General Store. The circuit judge was a tired old man named Harrison, who'd seen enough of the world to know that love didn't always follow proper schedules. Zeke stood as witness. Mrs. Chen had made the trip too, bringing a small cake she'd baked that morning. The ceremony was short, simple, perfect. "Do you, Samuel Brennan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "And do you, Margaret Crawford, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife." Sam kissed his bride while Zeke cheered, and Mrs. Chen wiped tears from her eyes. For one perfect moment, everything was right. Then Zeke's expression changed. He was looking past Sam toward the door. "We got company." Sam turned. A man stood in the doorway, tall, thin, wearing a badge that glinted in the afternoon light. "Samuel Brennan." "That's me." "I'm Deputy Marshal Thomas Reed out of Cheyenne." The man's face was grim. "You're under arrest for the murder of James Crawford." The world stopped. "What?" Maggie stepped forward. "That's impossible. James left our ranch days ago. He was alive. His body was found this morning, shot in the back on the road to town." Reed's eyes moved to Sam. "Witnesses saw you arguing with him, saw you threaten him, and the bullet that killed him matches the caliber of rifle you carry." "I didn't kill him." "That's what they all say." Reed pulled out handcuffs. "You can come peacefully, or you can make this harder than it needs to be." Sam looked at Maggie. Her face was white with shock. "Sam, don't—" "I have to." He stepped forward, offering his wrists. "If I run, it makes me look guilty, and I ain't guilty." "But, Maggie—" He met her eyes. "Find out who really did this. Someone setting me up. Someone who knew exactly how to make it look like I was the killer." The handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "Blackwood?" Maggie breathed. "Prove it." Sam held her gaze as Reed led him toward the door. "Find the proof and bring it to Cheyenne. I'll be waiting." "Sam, I love you." "Margaret Brennan, don't forget that." They took him away. Maggie stood in the doorway watching until the deputy marshal's horse disappeared over the horizon, her husband of less than an hour riding toward a trial that could end with a noose around his neck. Zeke put a hand on her shoulder. "What do we do?" Maggie's jaw tightened, her hands curled into fists. "We find the truth," she said, "and we burn down everyone who stands in our way." Maggie didn't sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen table with the journal open in front of her, reading every page, searching for anything that might connect Blackwood to the Crawfords. The connection was there. It had to be. "You need rest." Mrs. Chen set a cup of tea beside her. "You can't help him if you collapse." "I can't help him if I stop looking either." "What are you searching for?" "A reason." Maggie turned another page. "James Crawford came all the way from Pennsylvania to bring me back. He had money power connections. Why would someone like that end up dead on a road in Wyoming?" "Maybe he made enemies." "He made enemies everywhere. But someone had to gain from his death. Someone who knew exactly how to frame Sam for the killing. Mrs. Chen sat down across from her. You think Blackwood? I think Blackwood wanted Sam destroyed. And I think James Crawford was stupid enough to trust the wrong people. The pieces were there, scattered like broken glass. Maggie just had to find a way to put them together. At dawn, Zeke arrived with old Jack Patterson and two other ranchers Maggie didn't recognize. Their faces were grim but determined. We heard what happened, Zeke said. We're here to help. I need information. Maggie stood. Everything you know about Blackwood, every dirty deal, every person he's hurt, every witness who might be willing to talk. That's a lot of people, Jack said. Then we better start now. They spread out across the territory. Maggie rode to Elk Ridge with Mrs. Chen. Zeke took the northern ranches. Jack covered the south. By nightfall, they'd gathered more stories than Maggie could count. Blackwood had been running Medicine Bow like his personal kingdom for 15 years. He'd foreclosed on honest families during hard times. He'd bought up water rights and squeezed out anyone who wouldn't sell. He'd bribed the sheriff to look the other way while his men intimidated competitors. But none of it explained James Crawford's murder. We're missing something, Maggie said. They'd gathered at Mrs. Chen's boarding house, papers spread across every surface. James didn't come here for Blackwood. He came here for me. Maybe that's exactly why Blackwood wanted him dead, Zeke said. What do you mean? Think about it. Zeke leaned forward. James shows up with those hired men. He threatens you, threatens Sam. If you'd gone back to Philadelphia with him, what would have happened? I would have signed the inheritance papers, taken over Daniel's estate. And the journal. The one with all the evidence about the Crawford mines. Maggie's blood went cold. It would have gone with me. Exactly. But if James dies here in Wyoming and Sam gets blamed for it, Zeke's eyes narrowed. The Crawfords back east don't know about Blackwood. They just know their man was killed by a local rancher. They send lawyers instead of detectives. The investigation stays local, where Blackwood controls everything. And the journal stays here, Maggie finished, where it can't hurt anyone. But why would Blackwood care about a mining scandal in Pennsylvania? The question hung in the air. Then Mrs. Chen spoke, her voice quiet. Because maybe it's not just Pennsylvania. Everyone turned to look at her. My husband died building Blackwood's railroad spur, she said. 16 men died in that tunnel collapse. Blackwood said it was an accident. Bad rock. Nothing anyone could have predicted. Her jaw tightened. But my husband wrote letters. He said the supports were weak. Said Blackwood was cutting corners to save money. Said he was afraid something terrible would happen. Do you still have those letters? I kept everything. I didn't know what else to do with them. Maggie felt the pieces clicking into place. Blackwood's hiding the same secrets the Crawfords are hiding. Unsafe conditions. Workers dying because profits mattered more than lives. If that journal gets out, Zeke said slowly, people might start asking questions about other operations, other deaths, including Blackwood's railroad. So he killed James to protect himself. He killed James to keep me quiet. Maggie grabbed the journal. James was just collateral damage. A convenient way to get rid of Sam and me at the same time. Can you prove it? Not yet. But I know someone who can help. She rode through the night to reach Cheyenne. The territorial prison sat at the edge of town, a squat stone building that looked like it had been designed to crush hope. Maggie talked her way past 3 guards before she finally reached Sam's cell. He looked terrible. Bruises covered his face. His injured shoulder had been crudely bandaged, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. Maggie. I'm here. She pressed her hands against the bars. Sam, I found something. Blackwood killed James. He did it to protect himself from a scandal that goes back years. Can you prove it? Mrs. Chen has letters from her husband. He warned about the railroad collapse before it happened. If we can show that Blackwood has a pattern of covering up worker deaths, That's not proof he killed James. No, but it's motive. And if we can find the men who actually did it, the men James brought with him. Sam's eyes sharpened. They disappeared after his body was found. Because they're witnesses, or accomplices. Maggie gripped the bars harder. Sam, where would hired men go if they wanted to disappear? Blackwood owns a mining camp up in the mountains. He uses it for storage mostly, but there's bunkhouses. Men could hide there for weeks without anyone knowing. How do I get there? You don't. Sam's voice hardened. Maggie, those men are killers. If they see you coming, then I won't let them see me. This ain't a game. You think I don't know that? Maggie's eyes burned with tears. She refused to let fall. You're sitting in a cell waiting to hang for something you didn't do. I'm not going to let that happen. Not when I can stop it. And if you get yourself killed trying, then at least I died fighting for something that mattered. Sam reached through the bars and touched her face. You matter. More than revenge. More than justice. More than proving Blackwood wrong. This ain't about revenge. It's about truth. Maggie covered his hand with hers. Sam, you asked me to find the proof. Let me find it. Not alone. I won't be alone. Zeke's coming with me, and Jack. And everyone else Blackwood's ever hurt. She squeezed his hand. We're going to bring you home, Samuel Brennan, I promise. She kissed him through the bars, tasted salt and desperation and love. Then she left to finish what they'd started. The mining camp sat 3,000 feet up in the mountains, accessible only by a narrow trail that wound through rocky terrain. Maggie led the group Zeke, Jack, Mrs. Chen, and 4 other ranchers who'd finally found the courage to stand up. They approached at dusk, using the dying light as cover. 2 guards at the entrance, Zeke whispered. Probably more inside. We need those men alive, Maggie said. They're the only ones who can testify about what really happened. How do you want to play this? I'll go in first, alone. That's suicide. It's strategy. Maggie pulled the journal from her bag. James's men were hired muscle. They followed orders for money, but James is dead. Who's paying them now? Blackwood. Exactly. And if I can convince them that Blackwood's about to throw them under the wagon to save himself, they might turn on him. Money buys loyalty, but it don't buy courage. Maggie stood. Cover me. If I'm not back in 20 minutes, come in shooting. She walked toward the mining camp with her hands raised. Hey! One of the guards spotted her immediately. Stop right there. I'm not armed, I just want to talk. Lady, you picked the wrong place to wander. Did I? Or did Harold Blackwood pick the wrong woman to cross? The guard's face went pale. How do you know that name? I know a lot of names. James Crawford, Samuel Brennan, the 16 men who died in the railroad tunnel. Maggie stopped 10 feet away. I know Blackwood killed James and framed my husband, and I know you 2 were there when it happened. You don't know nothing. I know that when the territorial marshal figures out what really happened, Blackwood's going to need someone to blame. You think he's going to take responsibility? Maggie shook her head. Men like him don't go to prison. Men like you do. The guards exchanged looks. She's bluffing, one of them said. Am I? Maggie pulled out the journal. This belonged to James Crawford's father. It's got records of every mine accident the Crawford family covered up, every bribe they paid, every inspector they silenced. She held it up. When the newspapers get this, they're going to start asking questions about the Crawfords, about Blackwood, about everyone involved in these schemes. What do you want? The truth. Tell the marshal what really happened. Testify against Blackwood. And maybe you walk away with your lives instead of dancing at the end of a rope. The silence stretched between them. Maggie could feel her heart pounding, could feel the weight of everything riding on this moment. Then the second guard lowered his rifle. Blackwood told us it would be clean, he said. Said he'd pay us $500 each to make the Crawford man disappear and plant evidence on the rancher. And you believed him? We believed his money. The guard spat on the ground. Should have known better. Men like Blackwood don't leave witnesses breathing. He's planning to kill you. He's planning to let us hang. Same difference. Then help me stop him. Testify. Tell the marshal everything. The first guard shook his head. Our word against his Blackwood owns half the territory. He's got lawyers, politicians, money. Who's going to believe a couple of hired guns? I will. Maggie stepped closer. And so will every rancher he's ever cheated, every family he's ever destroyed, every worker who died in his mines and railroads. She looked at both men. You're not the only ones he's hurt. You're just the ones who finally have a chance to hurt him back. Something shifted in the guard's eyes. Not trust, not yet, but something close to hope. What do we have to do? The second guard asked. 2 days later, Maggie stood in the Cheyenne courthouse with an army behind her. The ranchers filled the gallery. Mrs. Chen sat in the front row, her husband's letters clutched in her hands. Old Jack Patterson had brought his own records, years of correspondence showing Blackwood's predatory business practices. And at the witness stand sat the 2 guards, their faces pale, but their voices steady as they told the truth about James Crawford's murder. Blackwood approached us in the saloon, the first guard testified. Said he had a problem that needed solving. Said there was a woman who knew too much and a rancher who was protecting her. What did he ask you to do? Wait for Crawford on the road outside town. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Then plant the evidence on Brennan's property. And the murder weapon. Blackwood provided it. Said it was the same caliber as Brennan's rifle. Said no one would look too close. The prosecutor turned to the gallery. No further questions. Blackwood sat at the defendant's table, his face gray, his lawyers whispering frantically. For the first time since Maggie had met him, he looked afraid. The judge called a recess. Maggie pushed through the crowd to reach Sam, who sat in chains at the back of the courtroom. You did it, he said. We did it. She took his hands. Together. Maggie, don't. She pressed a finger to his lips. Save it for when you're free. The trial lasted 3 more days. Witness after witness came forward to testify against Blackwood. Ranchers he'd cheated. Workers he'd endangered. Officials he'd bribed. The web of corruption stretched further than anyone had imagined. On the 4th day, the jury delivered their verdict. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant, Harold Blackwood, guilty. Blackwood's face crumpled. His lawyers slumped in their seats. On the charge of fraud, guilty. On the charge of bribery, guilty. On the charge of obstruction of justice, guilty. The judge banged his gavel. Samuel Brennan, you are hereby cleared of all charges. You are free to go. The courtroom erupted. Maggie threw herself into Sam's arms the moment the chains came off. He held her so tight she couldn't breathe and she didn't care. Let's go home, he whispered. They rode back to Medicine Bow together, the summer sun warm on their faces. The ranch looked different somehow. The burned skeleton of the barn still stood, but there were people working around it. Zeke and Jack and Mrs. Chen and a dozen others hauling timber and hammering nails. What's this? Sam asked. Zeke grinned. Neighbors helping neighbors, the way it should have been all along. We can't afford. It's already paid for. Mrs. Chen stepped forward. The territorial governor seized Blackwood's assets. Turns out there's a fund for victims of his crimes. She smiled. You qualified. Sam looked at Maggie. His eyes were wet. I don't know what to say. Say thank you and get to work. Zeke handed him a hammer. This barn ain't going to build itself. They worked until sunset, then gathered around a fire that Mrs. Chen had built. Someone brought food. Someone else brought music. For the first time in years, the Brennan ranch felt alive. Later that night, after everyone had gone, Sam and Maggie sat on the porch together. The stars spread across the Wyoming sky like scattered diamonds. I thought I'd lost everything, Sam said quietly. When they put me in that cell, I thought that was it. The end of everything I'd been fighting for. You didn't lose anything. I almost did. If you hadn't, I wasn't going to let them take you from me." Maggie leaned her head on his shoulder. "Not after everything we went through to find each other." Sam was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. "What's that?" "Something I should have given you before." He opened the pouch and a gold ring tumbled into his palm. "It was my mother's. She gave it to Ruth on our wedding day. Ruth wore it until—" He swallowed hard. "Until she couldn't anymore. Sam, I can't—" "You can." He took her hand and slipped the ring onto her finger. "You're my wife, Margaret Brennan. You deserve to wear it." The ring fit perfectly. Maggie stared at it, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." Sam pulled her close. "And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret walking into my kitchen that night." "I couldn't regret it if I tried." They sat there until the stars faded and dawn broke over the mountains. A new day, a new beginning, a life they'd built from the ashes of everything they'd lost. 6 months later, the barn was finished. The herd was growing. The garden Maggie had planted was thriving in the summer heat. And every night without fail, she set 2 plates on the table. Because she'd learned that home wasn't a place. It was the person you chose to share your life with. The person who stood beside you when the world turned cruel. The person who believed in you when you'd stopped believing in yourself. Sam came in from the fields one evening to find her standing at the stove, stirring a pot that smelled like heaven. "Smells good," he said. "Beef stew, your mother's recipe." "You found it." "Mrs. Chen helped me track it down." Maggie smiled. "Said it was time this house remembered what it was like to be a home." Sam crossed the kitchen and wrapped his arms around her from behind, rested his chin on her shoulder, breathed in the smell of food and warmth and the woman who'd changed everything. "Thank you," he said. "For what? For not leaving, for not giving up, for being stubborn enough to fight when anyone else would have walked away." Maggie turned in his arms. "I wasn't being stubborn. I was being smart. I knew a good thing when I found it. Even when that good thing was pointing a rifle at you. Especially then." She kissed him softly. "Now wash up. Supper's almost ready." Sam washed his hands and took his seat at the table. The same seat he'd sat in alone for 12 years. The same table where he'd eaten in silence, surrounded by ghosts. But the ghosts were quiet now. They'd finally found peace, just like he had. Maggie brought the bowls to the table and sat across from him. 2 plates, 2 forks, 2 cups. 2 people who'd found each other against impossible odds. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How different everything is. How different I am." "Different good. Different alive." Sam reached across the table and took her hand. "I spent 12 years surviving, Maggie. Just getting through each day. Then you showed up and reminded me there was more to life than just not dying. You reminded me of the same thing. Then I guess we saved each other." "I guess we did." They ate together as the sun set over Wyoming. 2 people who'd learned that the hardest thing in the world wasn't facing your enemies or fighting for justice or surviving when everything fell apart. The hardest thing was letting yourself love again after you'd lost everything. But they'd done it anyway. And every night for the rest of their lives, Margaret Brennan set 2 plates on the table. Because no one should eat alone when there's someone willing to stay.